So, Craig, the president of Webb Analytics, consulting and research company, helps construction supply companies identify and respond to trends, threats, and opportunities. Craig and I go way back. We met probably before he was editor of Remodeling Magazine. I go way back with JLC Live, as does he. He spent 12 years as editor of Pro Sales, nation's most honored publication for building material dealers, as well as 5 years as editor-in-chief of Remodeling, as I said.
When you guys say you go way back, what year are we talking, folks?
Well, I go back 16 years in the business.
Okay.
So I would imagine probably 15 and a quarter. I probably first heard Dave speak. So
we're probably, 2008, 2009, 2010, or is that even a little? Yeah, we're right at that basic time period.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I really thought that Craig would be helpful because he's got his hand on the pulse of what's going on with the supply chain, manufacturers, suppliers, and this affects all the people we work with. And all this conversation about a recession, what's going to happen. So I wanted Craig kind of to give us the supply side. What does he see? What does he see even geographically? Kind of make that statement, Craig?
I will try. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to turn it over to you. And Craig was nice enough to put together, let me do this.
Yeah, let's see if I
nice enough to put together a PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what we'll be viewing.
Let's see if I can find now. How did I do this? Notification. Oh, it's Windows. That's better. Okay. And I'm going to if I hit the play button, can you see?
I think you got to be make presenter.
I already did that.
You did.
Okay.
We don't see your screen
yet.
Oh,
can't share your screen. We're experiencing difficulties with the video conference and are unable to share your screen.
Say what?
Come on, GoToMeeting experts.
I'm going to try once more.
Oh, Lord.
Don't worry. We will, if this does not work. Okay, now it says I'm sharing my screen.
There you go. Yeah. Now we see it.
Okay, so if I hit play. Now, do you see a great big building that's upside down?
Sure do.
Yep.
Okay. That's from Vancouver, Canada, by the way. It was fun. I'm sort of glad I got that. Anyway, just a tiny bit of background on where I come from and how I view the world. I've been a reporter and a collector of information for more than 50 years. This is me interviewing Colonel Sanders in the summer of 1973.
Oh, come on, Craig. You're starting out with the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We have some of the most modern technology behind us, and obviously the hair is a little different. A couple of things that Colonel Sanders said to me. One was that he's actually from Indiana, like I am, even though he's a Kentucky colonel. The second is that he started Kentucky Fried Chicken when he was 62 years old.
Wow.
And in some ways, that was an inspiration to me to, at the age of 64, after 15 years with Pro Sales and Hanley Wood, and I was at United Press International. I covered the World Cup soccer tournament. I covered presidential elections. I lived in Rome and in Brussels and in New York. Wrote for McGraw-Hill, a bunch of other people, to finally go off and for the first time in my life, have a job in which I did not get a regular paycheck. And that's by creating web analytics. And I've got to say, it's been a real exciting experience and a scary experience for me to actually go through the life that you guys have been going through for a long, long time. But as David said, my job is to be sort of that 30,000-foot guy who looks for the trends and the threats and the opportunities facing construction supply. You know, the incoming missiles that you don't necessarily take a look at because you're too busy worrying about what's right in front of you.
Greg, what year did you do that?
When I created it 4 years ago.
That was 4 years ago. Okay.
So now it's been. I started in construction supply in 2006.
Okay.
Before that, I was
starting your analytics in like the mean, as far as people wanting to know what's going on with materials and all of that, I don't know if that's been a helpful thing for you or if it's just been a chaotic thing, but it seems like
Well,
there'd be a lot of interest.
well, it's like it's like being a small town newspaper editor, except your readers live all over the United States, and
Well, yeah.
and so consequently, there's only 2 or 3 people who do what I do in the whole country. Focus on the lumber yards and the supply chain like this, and so I've been I covered the White House, like I said, and if you go to the bathroom and they declare war while you're in the bathroom, it's not like it's not going to get reported. There are 100 other people in the press room, all anxious to get the news out. Whereas in construction supply, there aren't that many people. So I really feel as if I'm providing valuable information. A lot of what I try to do too is put things in perspective and try to explain and maybe come up with phrases that explain sort of what's going on. And when I've been thinking about the mood that I get from building material dealers and frankly from a lot of remodelers around the country, the phrase that came to mind was that everyone out there is positively nervous in the sense that everybody's positive about where they are right now, but they keep hearing about this distant rumbling that's in the future or that's sort of off in the distance. And I hear a recession is coming. Now I'm really busy right now, but I hear a recession is coming. And so that's both the positive and the nervous. And what do you do about it? I've thought about that too. And I came up with this example. If you're barreling down the highway and you see a sign above you that says accident ahead, be prepared to stop, there's probably several things that you do right away. The first one is you take your foot off the accelerator. You don't hit the brakes, but you take your foot off the accelerator and you coast for a while, and you probably were going over the speed limit anyway. So it just gets you down to the speed limit. You start looking around. You start becoming aware. And then a calculation starts going in your mind. The calculation is this. Will the accident be cleared by the time I finally get there? Because I don't know how far ahead it is. And at the same time, what's my best bailout exit? And my recommendation to people in construction supply right now, and to a lot of remodelers and builders too, is to treat what you're doing, what's going on right now, as if you see that accident ahead sign. For this reason, you were probably going too fast anyway. We had an unsustainable system. In some ways, having a slowdown is a welcome thing. It gives you an opportunity to do things better. At the same time, we may not have a recession. By the time we actually get through the backlog that we have in our businesses right now, which probably will take us through the late spring,
Yeah.
the economy may be much better by then. We may never actually have to hit the brakes. So I don't think people should sort of get scared and bail out right now. And there's sort of a complicated back and forth that's going on that you hear. Hardware Retailing just wrote that said, oh yeah, activity will be a slower pace, but backlogs are nearly 11 weeks in the construction industry. Then they also quoted a lady from the NAHB. We expect a mild recession, but the remodeling market's probably going to withstand the slowdown better than other sectors. So once again, remodelers may not have that. I was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal recently, and I gave them that metaphor about the accident ahead, and the writer really liked it, and then he proceeded to not use it in the story, and in fact take a different direction than the way I suggested things were.
Those punk writers.
Those punk writers. He decided that John Burns, real estate consulting's expert, was better than me in terms of what's going on, and what there's an interesting sort of dichotomy that's happening in terms of the way people describe things. One suggestion is that remodeling among the rich, the big ticket jobs, won't go down because the rich are always with us and the rich have lots of money and the rich will continue to spend. But then there's this other belief that the rich are the ones who are most affected by changes in their 401k or whatever, so they're not going to do it. And I think that, how can that be? How can there be these challenges? I was fascinated by this table that Tom Tomlak of Zonda came up with. The answer is depending on what you do in remodeling, where the economy is going, and how wealthy your customer is will have a difference. You can see that the purple is the share of business in various projects done if you make less than $60,000. The yellow is by people 60 to 99,000, 100,000 above is the green. So when you get to something like if you're installing a pool, you really don't care what poor people think about the economy because they're not going to install a pool anyway. It's sort of like that in the kitchen space. But if it's a roof and you're consulting with roofers or HVAC people, then the fate of the economy and whether they go to Walmart rather than Whole Foods makes a difference because, when their roof goes out, and they got to do something about it. So, the answer is how will remodeling be affected? Well, in some ways it will be affected based on the income levels of the customer. It also will vary based on the project that actually has to be done. And then you get into the third level about, the relative geographic parts of the country that do better or worse depending on either snow or time of year or their own particular customer mix. Places with newer homes don't tend to need roofs as much as places with older homes, and so it goes. You know, the challenge, I think, for a lot of us is that we tend to focus on the biggest possible numbers, and we tend to take general economic statistics and apply them to everything. So if you're the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies, you think that remodeling activity is going to go down because historically there were a lot of things that affected the rise or fall of remodeling spending. One of them is the number of new homes that get sold. So if the number of new homes that get sold drops by 50,000, that's X percentage of a change in your spending. Hanley Wood used to do this all the time, and their remodeling market index was painfully out of date by the time they got done because they were relying on numbers that were old. Now that Zonda's there and people like Tom Lack are there, I think that stuff's going to get much better. All that said, John Burns or NKBA asked people about, for example, kitchen and bath sales. It's growing less. You're still going forward, but you're just not growing like you used to. Now, could you really, for a lot of people, a 15 or 16% growth rate is unsustainable anyway. So you do have that. And then if you look at, how much work is booked up ahead on the right-hand side, what is that, 4 months, 10%, 10, 13, 39% of the people responding had at least 4 months of work as of November. So that takes you to December, January, February, March. It's not until April. They've got enough stuff to keep them going through April and probably by then, beyond that. So once again, are we going to really have slowdowns in the remodeling industry that are painful? 2000 Great Recession style? I don't think so. If you talk to people like Stephen Kim, who's one of the best analysts in the country for the housing industry, last June, when he said things were going to start slowing down, he talked about a cycle of fear. And that's largely what we've had. One person at Zonda, their chief economist, said that in new home construction, FOMO used to be what it's all about, fear of missing out. It was replaced by what she called FOBAT, fear of buying at the top.
Right.
And now, so there is a belief in general that if once we get more stability and people know what the general level is in the mortgage rate, that sales will recover just for that reason. Now, that said, there is going to be a slowdown in the number of housing starts, and there is a relationship between housing starts construction, and ultimately some parts of remodeling. You know, um, so that is something that you can expect, but it's not necessarily going to be dramatic. Now, if all of you had customers in Boise, Idaho, I'd say you should worry because, a place like Boise was overblown. All those Californians jumping off the plane and immediately buying something without looking at it. But that's not really what it is for most of the country, and certainly not for the places where remodeling is extensive. So, it is happening, but I don't necessarily think it's going to, I think its impact is going to be limited to certain overblown parts of the country. In terms of pricing, one of the interesting things too is that I don't think pricing for housing is necessarily going to drop dramatically, except in places like, let's say, Boise, maybe Austin, because the big home builders are offering all sorts of different benefits that they did not have to offer for the last 2 years. Stephen Kim talked about going into Jacksonville, Florida, late last year when things were still hot. And he walked into a sales office, and the sales manager for the housing development said, "Well, I'm only allowed to sell 3 houses a week." And because that's all we can build. We just can't, you take all our sales offices together, we all sell 3 houses a week. That's about the capacity of the construction company. And he said, every time we sell a house, the next time a person walks in and wants that same house, we raise the price by $1,000.
Yeah.
You're just not seeing that anymore. And people are freaking out, but they're freaking out because of unsustainable stuff. The history of the attitudes of builders, which is reflected in the blue line here, which is the NAHB Housing Market Index. The blue line is an attitudinal line. The red dotted line is the actual changes in starts. You can see that in general, when things get better, builders are over optimistic. And when things start going down, builders get over pessimistic.
They're in full freak out mode right now.
Yeah, and they're in freak out mode right now. Even though it's funny, there is this back and forth all the time on LinkedIn between the lady who is the chief housing reporter for CNBC, Diana Olick, and the people who are reading her commentaries. And she basically said, we were going too far too fast. This market was out of control. Things needed to slow down. And everybody whose replies says, yes, Diana, things are going to hell. Life is horrible, and her view is that, no, it's not horrible. You look at the profits of the big builders. They got money to handle this. In general, I'd say that if you want to give your people some advice about where to go, about what to look at, it's to look at the quarterly numbers for custom home construction in the United States. Not all home construction, certainly not multifamily or all total starts. Look at custom home building. And every year, it's between 25% of all homes in the United States are built on a custom basis. And we are building more custom homes than we were in the past. And the custom home people are the ones who are most likely to hire some of your clients and engage in the really fancy kitchen and bath jobs and other jobs. And meanwhile, long term, one of the things that we've got going for us is that there's a lot of home equity ready to tap. I think something like 2/3 to some even bigger percentage of that of homeowners in America have a 3% mortgage or less. So they've been just building up equity left and right. Once again, Stephen Kim, to quote him, his view is that it's probably going to take several months for people who have a 3% mortgage to dither around and say, am I going to go to a new place and pay a higher mortgage or stay where I am, eventually decide to stay where they are, and then another 3 months to say, okay, well, what do we want to do now that we know that we're going to stay here? Is it going to be the kitchen? Is it going to be the office? Is it going to be the bathroom? 3 months after that, they'll probably make a decision, and then they'll start looking for a remodeler, and it'll take them 3 months to find a remodeler. And so his view is that it's going to take until late in 2022 or 2020, late in 23 or early in 24, when you're going to start seeing people tap their home equity lines. And then there's going to be continued business for remodelers and builders then. Interestingly enough, for all that we've been having problems, if you talk to the Farnsworth group, the interest by people to have projects done is a few percentage points less than it was before. You know, the definite bar is still pretty much where it was. The probably line is a little bit smaller, but there's still, you know, a decent number of people out there. And if you, you know, look, for example, in flooring as another example, you know, they're asking people, you know, how is your business? And 49% of the people thought their business is going to be up this year. You know, that's a recession. Boy, if that's a recession, that's the kind of recession I want to have, where 49% of the people do better. So economically, the conclusions I'm making are that things in remodeling won't be as bad as for housing in general, and I don't think things in housing are going to be as bad as people think they're going to be.
Can I do a simple summary? Can I do a simple summary, Craig?
Yes, please.
Basically, a slowdown in this case can be a good thing.
Yeah.
Allowing supplies to catch up.
Yeah.
And secondly, I watched a video over the weekend from something called the Fairway Group. I don't know if that rings a bell.
Uh-huh.
They do it's a real estate group.
Uh-huh.
And his whole point, he had, you know, more charts than you could shake a stick at. But he said people are holding back because it's 7%, but because the inflation fighting steps are slowing things down.
Yeah.
That when rates this summer or late summer hit 5%, you're going to see home buying go back up. And some of those people you see sitting on the fence on a 3% mortgage can begin to say 5% isn't bad.
Yeah. You know, especially if they talk to their parents and they ask their parents, Dad, what did you pay for your first mortgage? You know, being a little older than the rest of you, you know, one of my first mortgages was, I think, 14 or 15%.
Oh, and the whole buy down. Remember, you could do a buy down. You could do different things.
And you had, you know, variable rates and things like that. I'm going to change gears a little bit now and talk about the supply chain, because that's certainly, while it's something that people think has gone away and is much better, I would caution you that we still aren't going around as well as you thought we were, and it's going to have an impact on your clients going forward. One of the biggest suppliers of hard lines in the United States, the stuff that goes into your house, the stuff that gets sold in the lumberyard, is a company called Orgill. And their president gave a speech in around October where he talked about their fill rate, which is basically what percentage of stuff they promised to deliver they actually delivered. And they were as low as 75% earlier this year. His goal was to get up to 85%, which means that still, as of, you know, right now, 15 out of every 100 things they said that they would deliver to the store aren't there. It's like Forrest Gump's box of chocolates. Every time you open up the box from the Orgill, it's a surprise. You don't know what's there. And the variations will, you know, what we're short of will vary. You know, we're still having shortages of subflooring adhesive, windows in certain parts of the country, cabinets. You know, it really varies. And you could say, you know, well, things are getting better. This is a chart comparing the volume at the ports of the United States this year with last year. And the blue line, the teal line, is this year. And you can see that earlier this year we were significantly above where we were last year, then, or in 2021. Then it started to even off. And now, you know, the notion is that we're getting down to less than we were in December of 21 as of 2022. And you will hear stories that the Port of Los Angeles isn't anywhere near as backed up as it was. One reason why is because places like Savannah and Jacksonville is where all the ships started going to. And, interestingly enough, for all that things are better, I just saw yesterday a story that said even now, more than 4 out of 10 shipping vessels that are supposed to arrive on a particular day don't show up on that day. Now, it used to be 7 out of 10. Now it's, 6 out of 10. But it's still slow. I mean, we still have backups. And, frankly, if COVID is as bad in China as people think it will be, there is a belief that we'll see significant slowdowns that will be exacerbated by the Chinese New Year. We will see significant slowdowns in deliveries of goods, basically up until late spring, early summer of things. And by that time, COVID will have basically swept through the population and killed millions of people. But they will have gotten through it. And then there's a belief that actually then the Chinese economy will take off and signal another rise in inflation because they'll start competing again for oil and for core commodities and the like. So I just bring all this up just to say that if your clients' customers say, "Hey, there's not a supply chain problem anymore," you have to remind them that yes, there is, and there still are problems. This survey by the Farnsworth Group, for example, found that material availability was cited 63% of the times when people had to have a project delay in November of this year. Material prices was 35%. So, it's still going on. What are we short on? Two of the major dealers in the Southwest of the United States will tell you that, lumber is not a problem anymore. Prices have gone down dramatically, but we're still on shortages of things like gypsum, LVLs. There's also shortages of windows. And one of the reasons why I hear is because the glass makers who make glass for windows also make them for solar panels. So if the solar panel business rises, that's competition for the window makers. And so, you've got that happening. Prices and inflation. What's going on there? Well, we know that, they've just been going up steadily for the last several years. I think that there are three factors in general that will affect supply and price this winter. One is whatever the Federal Reserve does. The second is that if we get really bad weather in Texas, it's going to slow things down. I am sure that the rain in Northern California has got to slow down business, and disaster recoveries are going to be common too. I've heard that, for example, the shingles factories that serve Florida, are blowing and going because they've got all this stuff from the hurricanes that they're recovering. Meanwhile, manufacturers and what they do, that's another wild card, cutting output, continuing to cut output. We see that. But I think the biggest factor is going to be consumers' inflation expectations. If consumers think prices will keep going up, they'll change their behaviors in terms of how they decide to time things, how they decide to pay for things and the like. If they think inflation is going down and it's less of a problem, that gets them back to some of the behaviors that we had when inflation was really, really low. And you can see that, after peaking in the middle of this past year, now, well, in June, according to the New York Federal Reserve, whose survey I'm citing here, the median percentage increase, in other words, 50% above, 50% below, expected inflation increase for the coming year was 6.8%. When you got to the end of this year, you talked to the people, half of them were above and half of them were below 5%. So in other words, they're not thinking as much about that. Part of that is because of what's happened with gas prices going down. But I think in general, they are starting to see things get a little better in a few other areas. I guess eggs are one of the exceptions. All this leads me to think that when you talk to your customers, when you talk to your clients, there is going to be a resurgence in concerns about price by the ultimate end customer. You know, in the last 2 years, it was all about supply and demand. There wasn't enough supply, there was too much demand, so nobody cared what the price was. The question, you know, the usual response when somebody quoted a price to a lumber yard, for example, was to say, "That's outrageous. I'll take two of them."
Okay.
And we're just not seeing that now. But what that means is that people have been dinged over the last couple of years, or over the last year, and they've seen gas prices, they've seen other things. So I think you're going to see a lot more haggling over prices this year than you have in the last two. And if you haven't been in practice negotiating price, it's probably time to get back into practice. What does all that mean in my mind? I think that if people are going to be beating you up over prices and you're still going to be having problems with supply chains, and I haven't even gotten into the whole personnel issue, then how you manage your company and how efficiently you manage your company really matters. And processes, I think, matter more, you know, than ever. I'm fascinated that, you know, when the Farnsworth Group is calling up do it for me customers, people who want a remodeler to come in and do work, the first challenge they list is even getting the remodeler to answer the phone.
Yeah.
You know, to this day, in my mind, that's about the processes of intake, how you collect the stuff, how you set things up in such a way that the customer comes to you. I think the other challenge you've got to deal with is whether your staff can handle an upgrade, even if you get better computer systems. And, you know, there are a lot of lumberyards around the country where the sales reps have never even turned on the computer because they've made their living with their mouths, you know, and the company's let them keep going. Long term, in terms of long-term prospects and where they are, I would just say two things. One is that, you know, the classic thing that remodelers have going for them is that they work on older homes, and older homes need a lot of work. We built more homes in the 1970s than in any other decade. And as Kermit Baker of the Joint Center for Housing Studies said, we built a lot of really bad homes in the 1970s. Certainly not homes that can meet today's demands. Those homes also frequently are the ones that need the new kitchen, the new bath, the new interior, the better insulation upgrades and the like, you know, some of the bigger dollar projects. So when you put all that together, my gut feeling is that if you're a remodeler and you are getting twice as much business as you used to be able to handle, and we have a recession and things slow down and you have 1.5 times as much business as you can handle, you're still underwater. You still got more work than you can handle.
Yeah.
And I think that that's, you know, in many ways where we're going. So I believe that we're having tough times ahead. I talked about people being positively nervous. I think that attitude is going to be a big factor in the success of remodeling companies this year, being able to handle these pressures, being able to shift, being able to work themselves into a position where they're more efficient than they used to be. I think keeping an optimistic attitude and looking on the better side is a good thing. You know, just like people now say that a beer a day can help your gut bacteria. So, you know, when you guys have a beer tonight, it's not beer, it's a digestive aid. Think of it that way, and I hope you enjoy it. So that's me, and I will share all of this with David, who then can send copies out to all of you so that you can have all the slides. But that's what I'm seeing out there.
Well, so I got to say, Craig, that the gentleman I work with, the contractors, everyone is booked into the fall,
Wow.
and some booked into 2024.
Oh, my word.
I'm wondering, Dan, Kyle, Diane, what are you seeing from your clients? Is it also a backlog? Because sometimes the slowdown is not a bad thing. Can we catch up? Can it not just be a fire drill?
I'm seeing backlog, not quite I'm not quite as, obviously you're a better coach than I am, so you have your clients have a bigger
He has
backlog.
richer clients. That's right. So.
Yeah. I would say there's more there. All of a sudden, marketing is becoming a topic again. All of a sudden, making sure we're not getting lazy, to your point, Craig, earlier, with our sales process and our follow-up. One of my clients said the other day, he's like, we just got to work. We actually got to work a little bit now, is kind of how he described it. And I'd say just backlog's still healthy, but it is a little bit less, just across the board generality, than it was. Which, just like the silver linings you're talking about, that can be a good thing in some facets.
There was one guy who said that, if you're a good remodeler, you will reject at least 3 out of every 4 requests for work that you get.
Wow.
Because the price isn't good enough, it's not a project you want to do. Maybe we'll get to a point in the downturn where you're rejecting 2 out of every 3 requests you get, but you're still getting more requests than you can get.
Mm-hmm.
But a related question that a couple people we work with, Ed and I work with, that they've got 1 or 2 people who've postponed, not canceled, but postponed projects. So it's not like it went away, but there's that caution. And that's, you mentioned earlier, the economic caution, which is, because I don't know what's going on, let's just put this on hold. And I'm going to say it's less than 10% of the people I'm working with. It's not widespread, but it certainly is a topic that's starting to come up.
Yeah, and that gets into the question of what's your cash flow and how much cash do you have in reserve. Diane, I have to say that some of the best preparations I had to start web analytics came from going to sessions for remodelers and learning about work in progress reports, or learning how to, how much money you should be having, and giving percentages to your leads to figure out, So in many ways, that was some of the best training I had going into this job, and I've still incorporated it. I would imagine in your case, looking at how many days worth of money you have is probably something that people think about.
Actually, I don't do as much on that side as I do with helping people get a structured accounting system that they can look at and believe and understand, because so many people don't even.
I have all these bills in front of me. A
lot of people can't even tell what their gross profit margin is. So
really, wow.
At this point, I focus more on helping people get their systems set up so that they can get some decent information to work with. Although
we'll talk about processes. I mean,
yeah.
If in the old days you were getting much,
So.
We can't hear you, Dan.
Well, Zoom bingo. Who's going to be the first one to be muted?
Speak again, Dan.
That one. Hear me now?
Yeah. There you go.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Damn headset doesn't work. I was just going to say, being a contractor is one of the easiest professions to get into. What do you need? A hammer? Maybe a saw, and you're a contractor. So back to Diane's thing, yes, contractor, what's the difference between margin and markup? Most of them don't know what that is. So so that whole business thing. And speaking of that, what do you see in there about the labor? Because you didn't really touch on that, the labor force.
I am not hearing anything that's getting any better. I do see. I blame it on television, basically. Some of you may remember Dobie Gillis, which was a show in the 1950s and early 1960s.
I remember. Kyle won't remember it. Are you remembering Kyle, Dobie Gillis?
No.
Well, let me put it this way,
To make us feel better, just say yes.
Yeah. When's the last time you saw a small businessman featured on television? And I asked this question of a number of people, and they finally came up with one small businessman featured on television, and he was the man who ran the bodega on Sesame Street. But other than that, we have no indications in our society or on television or things like that. People just don't see builders and remodelers, basically.
Yeah.
They're in a sense invisible. I tell people that, most of the lumber yards who read people don't know about the lumber yards that I write about because they're by the railroad tracks in the bad part of town. And, that's often the case.
Yeah.
You don't want to visit some of the places where these guys work. And so I think getting people to appreciate this is just going to take decades. We work so hard to get people to think about the value of going to college. Now we've
Yeah.
got to get people to think about the value of continual learning, starting with a trade.
Right.
Because obviously, Dan, building a house is a lot different than it was. What we expect out of a house is a lot different than it was 30 years ago.
True.
And if you don't keep learning, there was one guy I know who was a very good remodeler, and he said, I live on a street and I can tell everybody else is looking down at me. He said, but they don't realize my pickup truck costs more than their Mercedes. And until we get to that point, my local baseball team is sponsored by the Steamfitters Union, and they've got ads every inning talking about how you can make over $100,000 a year working as a steamfitter.
Mm-hmm.
And until we start getting to that sort of explanation of things, I think it's gonna take time.
Yeah. I mean, look at all the high schools. They took all of the shop classes out,
Yeah.
What percentage of high schools? I think it's probably fairly high percentage.
Yeah.
That's where we used to get a lot of talent in the construction industry.
Yeah. And there still are some people out there. I just got an email from a guy at Eleanor Roosevelt High School in Greenbelt, Maryland, who runs one of those programs. And, I immediately connected him with some of the local lumber yards to make sure that they provide lumber. They're all recruiting like crazy.
Yeah.
And one of the neatest things I've heard is, are y'all familiar with draft day? A draft day for people in construction. What you'll have is people who are at a particular class. They're learning how to be carpenters or whatever. And the day they graduate, they have what's called a signing day, where they bring up Joe and they say, Joe is, a proud graduate of our program. He has just signed up with Frank and Jim's remodeling company. And Frank and Jim walk up there and give him the shirt, and he puts on the cap. They take a picture, and it's just like, an athlete signing
day.
It's like an athlete signing day, a draft day. And they do it in Norfolk. I've heard about a few other places where they do it. It works. When I give speeches, Ed,
you guys see my screen? This is one of my clients who did that.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
There's Jim Zangle congratulating him.
Yeah.
I'll be.
And it gets local press. Yeah.
Very cool. Wow.
What was really, really cool about that one was he said, it was after work hours and they weren't necessarily paying the other guys, but he had interned with them and then was getting ready to join forces. Literally everybody on their team showed up for it, which I thought, there's something there even for the rest of the team, that they took great pride in it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the NAHB did a survey a couple of years ago where they said, would you be interested in construction? And a huge percentage said no. And they said, well, what if you could make, $80,000 a year? And a huge percentage still said no. And they kept going. And then they finally found out that there was a very significant minority of people who would not take a job in construction no matter how much you paid them.
Mm-hmm.
For various things. In Washington, D.C., it is viewed as an immigrant job, even though all the people who run the companies, tend to not be immigrants. But, it is viewed as an immigrant job.
Yeah.
The main advice that I tend to give, Ed, that I tend to give people is I use an example of a guy who ran a lumber yard in Petersburg, Virginia, who successfully hired a woman after 20 wonderful encounters with her at the takeout window of McDonald's. She was the person running the takeout window.
Yeah.
And he thought to himself, this person is this friendly and efficient and effective at 6 o'clock in the morning. She's worth it. And so on the 21st cup of coffee, he offered her a job. And she went to work for him, and now she's doing window takeoffs and management and doing some other things, you know. But and that was just a case of proselytizing as much as anything.
And Ed, didn't you have a similar experience with a wedding planner?
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, we had a wedding planner during the height of the pandemic, Craig, where, obviously there was no weddings going on.
Yeah.
And actually, one of our clients hired her as a selections coordinator, which, if you think about it, is a perfect match, right? She's used to working with, homeowners picking out
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
color of their
Mhm.
tablecloths and the flavor of the wedding cake. And she went from that to helping them pick out, the color of their tile and the design of their backsplash. And she knew how to deal with kind of emotional kind of clients. And yeah, it was a perfect segue.
Oh, no, that makes all sense, all the sense in the world, you know.
Yeah.
I did remember when I was at remodeling talking to one guy. He said he would go to college graduations and look for the English majors because he knew they had no chance for a job, you know. And so and he would bring them in as, project managers and sellers and things like that. So
My
uh,
my son's girlfriend's brother, and she's from Switzerland, Craig.
okay,
Yeah, you put that together.
yeah,
And he is finishing a 3-year CAD drawing apprenticeship program in Switzerland.
wow,
He's been placed with an architectural firm. He interacts with not only the designer, but the engineers.
yeah.
And he takes not only the design, but then taking all the specs. And what a unique opportunity. He can work anywhere in the world.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
You know, no, there's some, I think this is very much a George Bush 1,000 points of light thing. There's stuff happening all over the United States. It's just not getting outside of that particular county that you hear about it. But there is stuff happening all over. But even to that point, we still need more. Everybody needs to be an advocate. And one of the things that I tell building material dealers is you have to spend more time on this, whether you want to or not. They're not going to just walk in the door. You just can't recruit them from the football team. Recruiting has to be part of your job.
Yeah.
And
So Craig,
yeah,
that was very helpful to kind of get a feel and a summary of it.
yeah.
I'm curious if I could, how can we support you, or how do you make money doing this? Do building supplies? I'm sure it's not a nonprofit. Do building supply companies hire you? Or are you selling your reports? What's the model?
It's a multi-legged stool. I give speeches to various groups.
Yep.
I do two major reports. One is on summarizing all the building material lumberyard sales openings and closures across the United States. And every year there are hundreds, sometimes over 1,000
Mm.
locations around the country which change hands. I also put out what is now probably the most comprehensive report on the state of construction supply in the United States, called the Construction Supply 150, in which I talk about, what the dealers are doing, where they are, how big they are, how they've changed. It represents maybe 75% of all the money spent on construction
Well,
at stores in the United States. I have a newsletter, but that's free. I also do research reports. I write thought pieces. And let's see, what else do I do? Oh, I also sell the data. Sometimes, there are some people, for example, who want to just keep up with all the openings and closures. So I give them a subscription to track that. But the old way, I don't sell advertising, so to speak.
right.
I, I sell some sponsorships to the reports, but that's it. And it astonished me this last year to realize I had been in the business 4 years. and I hadn't I hadn't failed. So
Here you are.
yeah, and like I said, Diane, just even learning how to use QuickBooks has been this experience for me. I also have these, I've also become for some companies what you might call the lumberyard whisperer. They want to come in, they want to sell their product in the United States, or they want to get into the United States, but they just don't understand what the supply chain network is. Or even how to get into it. So, for example, I'm now representing, or I'm a consultant to a company based in Finland that makes caulks and sealants, among other things. And so my job has been sort of to introduce them to how the product selection process works in the United States, and connected them with Lowe's and connected them with Do It Best and the like. And
Double your pricing for that, Craig.
well, we started off low, and I'm going to work my way up. Yeah.
Yeah. What you just mentioned there, like that, the value to a company that's trying to do that, and the connections are just incredibly valuable. Don't be shy about that one.
I got to say, you guys have been in this a lot longer than I have, but the biggest problem I have is that when I was a reporter all my life, I didn't charge anybody anything for anybody, anything.
Yeah.
We had sales, reps, your paycheck was your reward. You got paid in bylines. So now when somebody comes up to me and says, how much should I charge? I'm still incredibly cheap when it comes to going to a group like the Professional Remodelers Organization. They have a dirt cheap friends and family rate.
That's true.
So, could I charge more? Yeah, I just haven't learned how to do it. Yes, ma'am.
I have an idea. Are you familiar with a fellow by the name of Elliot Eisenberg?
No.
He does a daily, really, really short blog, but he's an economist and he's really interesting. I can't watch his stuff every single day, but I'm thinking about if you had a little brief blurb, I can send you a link to his stuff. But if you had a little weekly brief recap of what's going on in the materials arena, and you sold it for something reasonable, okay, that thousands and thousands of remodelers or custom home builders or developers, whatever, be willing to subscribe to, I think that could be really terrific and valuable information. I don't know, do you guys have any other resources, competing resources in terms of the supply chain? I can't wait around in a lot of the industry publications, but I don't think there's a whole lot coming out for people who really need to know that. So.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I used to be the chief economics reporter at United Press International, but I've never claimed to be an economist. I just got the job because I was one of the few people at UPI who could figure out percentages in his head. And because most journalists are journalists because they fail math in high school. But yeah, I've been thinking about there's Substack as an example, but the idea of my giving 10 or 15% of my money to Substack was just something I couldn't quite get used to. So we'll see.
There are a lot of ways to monetize subscriptions. I mean, you got 2 or 3 people in here that can certainly help you, give you the insights about how to set up a paid subscription service. And with everything that I would think that with, a medium amount of effort, you could put out something once a week that would be short and, just different insights over a period of time that you could, supplement your income a bit.
Well, I appreciate that.
It's an interesting idea because, I've got an email list, as does virtually everyone else.
Yeah.
And when we talked about a month ago, maybe it was 2 months ago, about the supply chain prices, which is what led to this meeting. man, I summarized that information. I sent that out to my list. And what we're saying here and what Diane's suggesting is a novel idea, which is a weekly summary. And I'm just going to make up a number, $49 a month. And you get you get a weekly update, because then we turn around and provide that to our clients. And what you're going to do, you're going to send me an email, the PowerPoint presentation and your contact info, and I'll forward that to everyone in our group.
I appreciate that. Yeah, my wife says I need my own marketing team. And she would be happy to negotiate on my behalf. As I go forward, I think that the first thing in my mind was to make sure that people knew who web analytics was. Because for the longest time it was, hi, I'm Craig Webb. I used to be editor of Pro Sales Magazine. A lot of people still think I'm editor of Pro Sales Magazine to this day, even though it's been 4 years and the magazine doesn't exist. But that said, I will come back and give it some more thought. I do have a monthly newsletter, Web Analytics Report, which I will try to, I'm hoping to write in the next day or so. So I will make sure that all of you, at least I'll forward a copy of it to all of you so you can see what it looks like. And maybe you can look at that and riff off of that and say, oh, I can see how you can, get from here to there.
But I got to say that I think, Diane, you turned me on to Seth Godin's blog, daily blog.
Mhm.
I read it every freaking day.
Yeah.
And this guy is smart.
Yeah,
And so just very concise. We're talking 1 or 2 paragraphs. Now that's a daily blog.
Yeah.
And a weekly, update of key 3 or 4 things. If I can read that in 8 to 10 minutes or less, I'll probably read it. But I may not take the time to read a 3-page newsletter.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Well,
hey, David, and everyone else, I'm sorry. I've gotta go pick up my mom from an outpatient program.
Yeah, you
Ended early.
Yeah,
So
I need to move on too. So
thank you so much for your presentation. It's been great. And
thank you.
Rest of the CCMers, I'll see you next time.
I have special reasons to reach out to each one of you for various projects I'm working on. So you're probably going to hear from me in the future. So
cool. Love to hear from you.
Bye, Ed. Thanks, Craig.
All right. And then there were 4.
The 4 amigos.
All right.
I think Spencer had mentioned he wasn't able to attend.
I thought I saw that too. Yeah, something came up at the last minute.
That was last week. He mentioned that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, look, the thing I wanted to go to now was, we've got a virtual meeting in less than a month.
What's the date of that?
It's the 24th, and I'm forgetting the dates right now.
Of
28th of February and the 7th of March.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, so that's not less than a month. Are we still having the February meeting?
I was going to ask that too.
Well, it's a great question, because I know that Vicki had put aside 8 until 3, but there's just 7 of us. So do we need 2?
Well, we've got 10 Eastern to 4 on the 28th. So I've got 10 to 4 both days.
With a break for lunch.
10 Central, Eastern?
10 Eastern.
10
Eastern.
9
to
Central.
3. Okay, that's what I have down. Okay, good.
Yeah. We got all 4 time zones here.
Yeah. If we took it, like you said, Diane, if we took an hour for lunch and just to kind of,
catch up on emails and take care of all of the other stuff that is spinning.
Yep. And if we end up, the second time wanting to cut that short, that's fine.
Well, so here's the question. With 7 of us and lunch, that's 8 hours. Do we just focus on one day? Do we need a second day? Rhetorical question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We would have to make it from 10 to, if we took a lunch break, what would that, that would be like 10 a.m. Eastern to
10 to 6.
6?
Well, that's 8 hours plus a lunch.
I personally would prefer, kind of two half days kind of broken.
I'd rather see it broken up too. It's kind of not very fair to the last 2 or 3 people, because will have been sitting there for a long time already.
Yeah. Now we could change it from like, shorten it up by 60 minutes or 30 minutes, depending on how it
Well, if
works
we
out.
get done early, we can always break.
Yeah.
Maybe we could make it 8 people if we get Mr. Webb to join our group. How about that?
Have Craig join us?
Yeah.
Interesting idea. You could see he was very receptive to some coaching.
Coaching, yeah.
Absolutely. I think he'd be a cool addition to our group if he's open to the idea.
I will bring it up.
I've seen that name many times and I thought, oh, that's some big company that's out there doing super duper stuff. It's just like, I had no idea. It was just Craig Webb.
Vicky did she send over a little bit of an agenda?
She sent over some questions. Yes, she did.
Yeah.
And
Somebody looking for it?
yes, I thought I had it. But here, let me do this.
This one here. I think I got it.
There they are. Can you see it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I like the idea. Maybe we go to a 10 until 3 on both days, loosely speaking. Or we just, if we finish, we end.
Yeah, I mean, do 4 the first time, save 3 for the second time. Second time's maybe a little shorter, or vice versa.
Well, we can also talk on the second day about, what the upcoming year might look like, and et cetera.
Yeah.
But then the last thing I thought, if we could come up with a shared agenda in sharing then, like as Vicky did, these initial questions.
Looks fine. Those questions look fine to me. I mean, they're excuses for talking with each other, for asking questions, and excuses isn't the right word. They're just kind of
they're an opening
outline for a starting point. Yeah, a starting point to talk about whatever is, I think, important for us. So
I'm going to resend this. Not that you need it, but can this be just the beginning of a discussion piece? And people could add and or edit. And maybe we end up with just what Vicky did here, like 5 questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then we know those questions going into the meeting, things we've thought about.
I mean, and ideally, especially if it looked like Vicky and I were going to do some of the moderate, I kind of prefer to have these already in writing from the person on the hot seat, so that we can kind of dig beyond this and kind of, what's going to keep you from these top 3 key focuses? Like, why didn't you do these last year? Are you sure this seems like a lot? Are you sure you want to take on this many? It just allows for a little bit more masterminding. So what I would love to see is, yes, maybe David, if you want to send this out and just say, we are going with this unless you guys have some different questions that you want to suggest. Okay. And then let's decide when everybody is going to submit these. That way we got kind of a deadline for that. I think we can kind of, why don't we say, hey, since we're doing 2, 3/4 days, let's not do our February meeting, but why don't we set February 13th, that day that our meeting normally is, to get these in. That's still 3 weeks out, but even February 20th, it'd be nice to get it a couple weeks in advance and just, we should already know most of the answers to these.
Yeah. I've got it. I've got to get the basis for a note, Kyle. That's helpful.
Cool.
Was anybody named February moderator? I know there were a couple moderators that were kind of,
not sure.
There were some questions about who's going to moderate which months.
And I think I'm set for April, I think. So I'm not going to be around in February.
Well, Kyle, didn't you say you and Vicky, one would moderate one day and the other would moderate the second?
I think I saw that in an email.
And I don't think, so we don't need a February or March moderator, do we, per se, for the regular meetings?
we're replacing the February and March meetings with the retreat meetings. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay, that'll help me with my calendar since I schedule everything around the calendar.
So David, you're doing the March, February part of it, right?
Well, no,
Of
I'm
the-
doing today. And then
I'm
for
talking
the-
about the retreat moderator.
No, Kyle's
no, that
going to
would
do one
be-
day and Vicky's going to do another day.
yeah, that's Kyle and Vicky.
Okay.
In that order?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I guess
I'll moderate the
uh,
first one, and Vicky will moderate the second one.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to put this into a note and follow up with everyone. Kind of
Yeah,
a summary of
Thank
what
you,
we're talking
David.
about here.
that'd be good.
You have been so consistent and persistent with letting us know about today's meeting.
Yeah. Thank you.
It
that
didn't
was
become
well
annoying. It's what I, my coaching clients, they have no basis for saying I didn't remember.
I liked it.
Yeah.
It
me
was
too.
persistent, but it was friendly,
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
and it got the job done too.
Yeah, I'm sorry we couldn't have more, but I had set this up with Craig about 3 weeks ago. And certainly understanding why Vicky isn't here made sense. Spencer, short term, and it happens, but everything's in the recording.
Yeah, exactly. And it was great. It was great information. I did a few screenshots as we went along, but he said he was going to provide the slides, so that's great. And I think personally, I mean, we don't have the whole group. We got 3 out of the 4 out of the 7. So as a majority, I guess
Yeah.
we can say that we would agree to invite Craig to join our group. So
That's going to be my follow-up note, which is, Craig, look,
good.
we talked afterwards and you'd be a welcome addition.
Yeah, and he brings a whole new perspective. I mean,
Sure
Oh my
does.
God. That'd be
he's
huge.
over on the materials side. And, a
Mhm.
long time ago, we had Brian Pavlik, who was in the
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we briefly had
USA
him.
something, so, but at any rate, the bulk materials buying group, and he just couldn't keep up with this. And so, but I think, yeah, and hopefully maybe we could help Craig grow his business too,
Absolutely.
There is no question. I thought your suggestion, Diane, was dead on. If he just had like a weekly bulleted update,
Mhm.
wouldn't you share that with your clients?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I would share with them the option to
That's-
sign up for that particular thing. If he wanted to have, like Kyle does, a nice
So
little affiliate link, that would be
Yeah.
even nicer. But
he should be able to mint his knowledge really easily.
yeah,
No problem.
yeah,
That's what
yeah.
I
And I think
meant.
people need it. I mean, where are they going to find out this information? And if it was a regular bullet that came out through the NAHB or through the HBA of Michigan or something, but again, I can't dig around in all of those things as they come out. But if it was geared, I do see things that are a little bit more geared towards commercial, but none of us really our clients are not in the commercial generally arena. They're generally in the residential arena. So yeah, I think that'd be just a very cool thing, and they need the information. So like one of my clients the other day said, yeah, they weren't, well, I shouldn't say the other day, this was like 2 months ago. And she said they were doing really well on a home, but they couldn't get any windows until February. No windows. It's pretty hard to close on a house and finalize it with no windows.
Yeah, plastic, 6 mil plastic just doesn't work.
It's not the long-term solution. So, yeah, getting some of those insights so that people can,
Yeah.
have some idea of what's going on would be terrific, I think. So,
Well, do you want me to give you a quick summary of what we just talked about in the last 15 minutes?
Sure.
So we've got our 2 virtual retreats coming up on the 28th, meeting from 10 to 3. Again, on the 7th, 10 to 3. Kyle?
It's currently on the calendar from 10 to 4.
Well, I'm thinking because of our numbers. Do you want to just leave it 10 to 4?
and we can
That's
break
fine.
early if
We could break early. Okay, 10 to 4. Kyle, you will oversee and help us moderate on the 28th. I'll let Vicky know that based on our conversation today, we're asking her to moderate on the 7th. And toward that end, I'm going to send out these questions, basically ask people to edit or make additional suggestions. I'll give a deadline for any of those suggestions, because then I will resend those, and people's responses to those questions we want back by the 20th of February, so that we do have answers to each of these agenda items for the meeting starting on the 27th, 28th.
And I'll go out and try to get those things pulled through onto the Google spreadsheet.
Yeah. And
Little
before you
pieces.
invite Craig, let's maybe, even though yes, we're 4, it's one of those, let's ask the others first before just inviting him. I think we've
Oh,
done
yeah.
that in the past, where like one person kind of said, oh, this looks good, and then not everybody had a chance to think about it. It might be good just to pitch that to everybody first.
Well, if everybody could watch the recording of his presentation, I think they get a good flavor for who he is and what he does.
Yep.
So,
When
Yeah.
I send out the recording, would it make sense to say, after he got off,
Yeah,
we
that'd be
thought
great.
he'd be a good addition, please watch the video. And if you think he'd be a good addition to the group, please let us know.
That's
well,
perfect.
well, I mean, Ed's already been here, so it's just Vicky and Spencer. So,
Yep.
That'd be good.
Yeah, and David, I think this is probably the first time you've done the recording. Do you know where to place it? If not, you can use my share file and send it to me, and I'll put it out in the Google Drive. But if you know where to put it, of course you can put it out.
I probably wouldn't. So can I send you a link to the file?
Sure. Where are you keeping it out in GoToWebinar? This is
Yeah, I just
GoToMeeting.
take the link. I take the link right from GoToMeeting.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Why don't you send me the link and then I can download it and
Okay.
I'll put it out in our
well,
Google
plus,
Drive.
plus I think people could watch it right from your GoToWebinar too, or GoToMeeting, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, if you send that link just for historical purposes, I'll put it
Yeah.
out in the Google Drive.
Right.
But yeah, that GoToMeeting link is nice and it's easy.
Yeah.
Cool.
By golly, we've changed the world here just today.
Yes, we did, by
Mhm.
golly. Again,
Yeah.
once
That's what happens when you get. That's what happens when you get the top dogs of the group together.
That's
Yeah,
right.
we get rid of the
Get all
dead
that-
weight. Is that
Get all
what
that
you're saying,
riprap.
Kyle? Yeah.
We've
all
got
that
a few
riprap.
minutes. Hey, Kyle, tell us where did you finally end up? It says you got 32 signups for your VIP club. Did you pick up any more?
No, it ended up at 32. And that's with everybody paying full freight. Like last year, I had some clients in there that were just kind of free of charge, as part of their coaching agreement, their one-on-one coaching. So it's about $100,000 more revenue already this year than it was last year, which is
Yeah.
a huge step
I was going to say
forward.
it's only 240,000. I mean, come on, is that the best you could do?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. And it's a good size group.
Yeah.
It was interesting. So it was a matter of being patient. A bunch of them came in at the last minute, of course, because people are obnoxious like that.
That's what they do.
Yep. But there was a decent number of folks who didn't renew that I was kind of like, of course they're going to renew, because everybody was very happy and excited about it. There was a lot of the biggest feedback I received was, I've got all kinds of ideas. I know what I need to do. I don't really want more training. I just really need to step back and implement. For some people, that's going to work out fine, but for a lot of people, that's going to make them feel good not to. I don't have all these additional meetings, but they ain't gonna do the work because they don't have the accountability and whatnot. So I think I learned a lot related to messaging. People need to realize that we're not just, and they should know this, but it's not just like more new content. There's a lot of reviewing it. There's a lot of encouragement, accountability. Let's set some goals. So that was interesting. It was a little bit of a kick to the gut on not getting some renewals, but the first when I started getting some no's on the renewals, because I offered that before I launched it, I told my wife and I told Bailey, I said, it's okay. Like, people were very happy last year. If they're not renewing, it's okay. And both of them were like, it sounds like you're saying that, but you don't really mean it. I said, I might be faking it a little bit, but there was a lot of, I don't like hearing no's, and I don't like, the disappointment that I worked very hard on having a good mindset, and not getting worked up if somebody didn't renew, and just stayed positive and kept promoting it. That was a lot of work for me. There was some growth there for me.
Wow.
That's
So
good.
that was an interesting experience to kind of navigate.
Have you ever been through a course like that, Kyle, where you just got so much and it just ended up being too much and you just kind of went, yeah, I just got to step back?
Yeah,
You felt,
sorta. Yeah, sorta. I think some of it was also I increased the price, so that I think that was part of it. Where, did they give me the straight answer, or did they just kind of find an easy out? There's a little bit of that too, I think.
Because,
just
Diane, you've been in a year-long course, and I've always thought about how challenging that would be. That's a long commitment.
Hmm.
I went through a thing with Jim Edwards and Dean, and that's where I was going to provide a little bit of feedback. Um, so we met with them every 2 weeks for 90 minutes, and every time, and we didn't miss a meeting, not a single one. Laura and I were in every single one, and we got transcripts, as well as recordings. And each time there were only four of us in the group, so they would split their time. Each one of us would get about 15 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, and then, a few extra minutes around the edges. But we got so freaking much. We couldn't implement as fast as and it wasn't training. It would be, I'd say, okay, could you go look at this sales page and give me feedback? And I'd get, 15 to 20 minutes of really good feedback. And of course, fortunately, it was in transcript. And the next time I'd say, okay, what do you think about this newsletter that we're sending out? And they'd give me a bunch of ideas. The reality was we just couldn't implement that fast. I
Yeah.
mean, we would get feedback that was so valuable, but it would be in order to implement, it would have been 8 or 10 hours. I mean, to them, it didn't seem like it'd take that long, but for us, it would take that long because we'd have to touch things and do things and change things, and we'd have to fit that in addition to all the day-to-day work we were doing. So I'm fortunately, and I say fortunately, they didn't offer this again because I don't think it was financially rewarding. I mean, they over-delivered. It was fabulous. It was a lot of money for us, but for them, they didn't make what they could have made doing other things.
Yeah.
But the reality was I was really relieved that they didn't continue it, because I'm going, I would have had to have said no, as great as it was, because it takes time to implement. And so I'm just offering you the feedback that maybe those weren't excuses. Maybe they were
Yeah.
things that people said, I got to
It was
try
just too
implementing
much.
some of this. Yeah.
There's several changes that already came to mind of, like, giving more time during the meetings for them to do the work. It's just like if my kid's in school and the teacher's like, all right, we're going to spend the next 20 minutes working on this assignment, they're either wrapping up with it or they just got a little bit to do at home. So that's kind of along what you're talking about, is the more you can get them to do on the calls, the less overwhelming it's going to be.
At least they can get a start on it and get
Yeah.
enthused about, oh, we
Progress.
got to start. There's some progress, and then picking it up again later isn't as daunting.
Daunting. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, they might be back.
cool. I'm so glad though you got that many people, and
Yeah.
they're
The
all
end
going to
result.
be in the same class at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so
Yeah.
And are
That's
you going
kind
to
of.
do breakout sessions?
Yep.
there's a community
Yeah.
there too, isn't there? Because you meet personally, so they get to
Yeah,
know each
last year
other.
we met. It was 20. There was a lot of times there was 25 people on a call. Some, their employees can come on. Sometimes there was 30. It didn't get over. That was a big experiment I had. It didn't get overwhelming as far as everybody had a chance to still talk. And yeah, they see each other for a couple days in May and October, and that was everybody's favorite. There were some people that didn't do a lot of the Zoom calls and just really dug the in-persons. That was another growth area of like people just kind of pick and choose the training that helps them the most, and some people were like reliable every time. Other people came and went, but everybody made progress. They had growth. It's, you know, one-on-one coaching. It's like, all right, here's where you are. Here's the deliverable. Here's where you're going to be. We can help and get from there to there. With group-based coaching, you know, it's I'm disconnecting. Like, I'm going to work hard to help you make progress, but a lot of the onus is on you, not me, to implement and to do with this information what you need to do. It's a different setup.
And are they coming back and sharing? What did I didn't quite pick that up. You might have said that, but are they coming back and sharing? Here's what I did. Here's what I accomplished. Like in the
Yeah,
next
a lot of times at the start of the next meeting, we review some of that. There's a members only area that was decently, you know, populated with questions and people sharing. Yeah. I'm going to do something a little different this time. I'm calling them the dream team. So the, you know, one meeting a month is you are partnered up with 3 others that you're going to get to know throughout the year. You're going to see them at the in-persons. And that's going to be very much focused on accountability and what are you working on and where are you stuck. So I've been tweaking some stuff. Really, more than anything, I've simplified it and I'm doing less. There's probably a dozen less meetings this year. Things are a little shorter. There's less prep for me. There's more reviewing. So, you know, it's should be more revenue, better results, and less work.
And how's your thing with Michael Anshell going?
It went great. We ended up selling 35 seats for it.
Okay.
At $2,000 a pop.
Nice.
So it was definitely there was a lot of interest around it, and people that had heard him talk about it and saying, okay, I've dabbled with this, I've tried this cost of project execution, and we went deep with it. That was another learning curve of I have 100% controlled every piece of training that I've ever put out, and now I got somebody alongside me that's doing the training along with me. And you know, it took a little bit of, after the first session, I wasn't super happy with how he presented and how prepped he was and how solid it was. I probably have too high a standard, but after I kind of gave him that feedback and like, I didn't feel great about that, man. And session number 2 was better. Session number 3, I took over for the most part because it was a topic that was my wheelhouse. And we built momentum as we went. Everybody was excited about it, happy with it. Good attendance, really good attendance, and so it went well. I think we're going to end up doing a kind of deliver now that the hard work of the presentation and the structure and all of that's done. I think we're going to try to do an in-person one this year, like in the fall.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of interest in it. So
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I know what you're talking about. I've been through the same thing with people I did last year with Robin and another person I did some classes with.
Yeah.
They never prepare quite like we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And present
the other,
like we do.
Yeah, the other thing is that it kind of got snuck in there, and Bailey and I did a good review of our calendar this year and really have everything planned out. Like we already have the date that we're thinking for Michael and I's in person. And I mean, we promoted this COPE thing, wrapped up the promoting of that. A week later, started the VIP club. So when we were in the middle of promoting the VIP club and really getting that going, we were delivering 4 of these COPE training, 5 of these COPE training sessions. So that combined, my first 2.5 weeks of December was some of the most stressed I've been in years, just workload wise and everything. So once that the end of the day, Thursday before Christmas, I was done for the year. It was a nice break for a couple weeks after a very busy couple weeks.
Good for you.
All right.
Cool.
Well, I'm going to get on another call here at the top of the hour. So thank you, everybody.
Yep.
It's been a pleasure.